On 21st of December 2009, Domino's Pizza made a video they never meant for you to see. It wasn't a commercial, it wasn't a press release. It was footage from their own private focus groups, the kind recorded behind two-way mirrors in windowless rooms, where real customers say what they actually think about your product. And what they said was brutal. The crust tastes like cardboard, the sauce tastes like ketchup. This is the worst pizza I ever had. That footage leaked onto YouTube. Domino's had no choice but to watch tens of thousands of people share the most humiliating documentary ever made about their own company. Here's what happened next. Instead of burying it, Domino's CEO walked in front of a camera and agreed with every single word. What followed was one of the most counterintuitive business decisions in corporate history. A brand built an empire on admitting it was terrible. This is a story of how Domino's turned shame into a $10 billion weapon. By 2008, Domino's Pizza was in serious trouble and had been for years. The company wasn't going bankrupt. Revenue for 2009 would only fall about 1% from 2008. The business still functioned, but the product had quietly become a punchline. Consumer research conducted before the turnaround showed something that should have stopped executives cold. In blind taste tests, people rated Domino's Pizza as worse than a generic, unbranded alternative. The brand wasn't just failing to inspire loyalty. The brand name itself was actively making people like the food less. The stock told the same story. Domino's had gone public in 2004 in what was then the largest restaurant IPO ever. By 2008, shares had fallen to around $4, near an all-time low. The market was pricing in slow, irreversible decline. Meanwhile, the pizza category was growing. Papa John's had built a premium positioning around quality ingredients. Pizza Hut dominated on variety and dine-in. Domino's had staked its identity on speed, 30 minutes or less, but delivery times across the industry were converging. The one thing that made Domino's distinctive was eroding, and what was left behind was just a mediocre pizza arriving on time. President of U.S. Operations Patrick Doyle later described the situation plainly. They knew the pizza wasn't good enough. The core recipe hadn't changed in decades. Consumers were leaving for fresher options, and the company had no credible answer for why they should come back. In 2009, with Doyle about to be named CEO, the company made a decision that defied every instinct in corporate PR. They were going to go public with how bad the problem was. Not just fix it quietly, not just roll out a new product and hope people noticed. They were going to put the criticism on national television, and they were going to do it before a single better pizza existed. The turnaround started not with marketing, but in a test kitchen in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Doyle posted printouts of the most devastating customer reviews on the office walls, not to punish employees, but to make sure no one could claim ignorance. This is what people think of us. This is what we're fixing. What followed was 18 months of obsessive product development. The culinary team tested 10 new crust types. They developed 15 different sauces. They worked through dozens of cheese blends before arriving at a combination they believed in. Doyle later described it directly. This was not a slight tweak. They changed the crust, they changed the sauce, they changed the cheese, they changed everything. Then came the logistical problem. All the ingredients changed, which meant all the supplies had to change. The recipe changed, which meant all 9,000 franchise locations worldwide had to be retrained. Roughly 180,000 employees at some point had to do something new and different to execute the plan, and every single delivery box had to be redesigned. While the kitchen worked, the marketing team developed the campaign. The official title was Domino's Pizza Turnaround. The media almost immediately renamed it the Our Pizza Sucks campaign. The strategy was built on a single bet, that radical transparency about how bad things had been would create more trust than any conventional advertising claim about how good things were now. There was no guarantee this worked. Doyle couldn't force anyone to try the new pizza. He couldn't make customers forgive the previous decade. The new recipe hadn't been launched yet when the first confessional ad aired. Domino's was asking the country to believe them, based on the most unusual form of evidence available, honesty. Early 2010, the campaign goes live. On national television, Domino's airs focus group footage of real customers calling their product cardboard and ketchup. Then their own president appears on camera, not to dispute it, but to confirm it. Doyle looked directly into the lens and said what almost no CEO in the history of brand management had ever said on national TV. There comes a time when you know you've got to make a change. He held up a photo sent in by a customer named Bryce in Minnesota, a pizza whose box lid had been crushed flat onto the pie, rendering it inedible. He made a public promise. This is not acceptable. We're better than this. The advertising world didn't know what to make of it. The campaign violated every convention. You don't air your own negative reviews. You don't acknowledge failure at scale. You don't make the face of your recovery campaign the same person who was in charge during the decline. Every rule said this shouldn't work. Consumers responded differently. After years of being marketed at with slogans and claims, someone in a suit was looking them in the eye and telling them the truth. For many people, it felt genuinely unusual, refreshing even. The message was simple: we screwed up. Come back and see how things have changed. First quarter of 2010, the new pizza launches. Same-store sales surge 14.3%. Doyle would later call it unprecedented, a gain he'd never seen in the industry. For the full year, same-store sales rose 9.9%. The stock, which had been trading around $8 or $9 per share, began a climb that would last nearly a decade. This is the part that matters most. The confession didn't just generate buzz, it created a credibility structure that made every future claim more believable. When Domino's later said their pizza was better, customers were inclined to believe them, because Domino's had already proved they'd tell the truth when the news was bad. The numbers that followed are almost impossible to believe, unless you watch them compound in real time. When Doyle took over as CEO in March 2010, Domino's stock was trading around $8 or $9 per share. When he stepped down in June 2018, 8 years later, it had risen to over $250 per share on a post-split basis. That's a gain of more than 2,200%. During that same 8-year stretch, Domino's stock outperformed Amazon. It outperformed Apple. It outperformed Google. A pizza company running on cardboard and ketchup jokes just a few years earlier posted better returns than 3 of the most transformative technology companies in the world. Revenue roughly doubled from $1.6 billion to $3.4 billion between 2010 and 2018. Net income nearly quadrupled. And in 2017, Domino's passed Pizza Hut to become the largest pizza company by global sales, a milestone that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The company's explanation for the turnaround was consistent. The transparency built trust. The product rebuild was real, not cosmetic. And then came the technology layer, the thing that turned a pizza company into something that looked more like a tech company operating a delivery business. But the results raise a fair question. Was it really the confession that drove the turnaround? Or was it the pizza? Or the technology? And what does the answer mean for any other company sitting on a product that isn't good enough? Other companies in Domino's position made different choices, and their outcomes help explain exactly what made the Domino's approach work. For most of the 2000s, Pizza Hut responded to declining consumer perception the way most brands do. They didn't respond. Ads focused on new menu items, promotions, and deals. The product perception problem was treated as a marketing problem, solvable with better messaging. Same-store sales continued to drift. By 2017, Pizza Hut had lost its position as the world's largest pizza chain to the company that had publicly admitted it was terrible. Quiznos, which dominated the fast casual sandwich category in the early 2000s, faced a similar erosion in customer satisfaction and franchise profitability. Their approach was the opposite of Domino's: incremental adjustments, price cuts, and quiet restructuring. The company filed for bankruptcy in 2014. The changes were too slow, too opaque, and too late. Customers had no reason to believe anything had fundamentally changed. The pattern is clear. When a product has a real quality problem, messaging it away extends the decline. Incremental fixes happen below the threshold of customer attention. The only intervention powerful enough to actually reset consumer perception is one that makes the problem impossible to ignore, and then gives people a concrete reason to believe it's been solved. Domino's made the problem impossible to ignore by being the loudest voice talking about it. Successful turnarounds don't hide the gap. They name it, they date it, they put a face on it, and then they close it loudly enough that the people who'd given up have a reason to look again. The confession and the recipe are the story everyone tells about Domino's. But there's a second chapter that explains why the turnaround lasted instead of fading after the initial buzz. Patrick Doyle began describing Domino's not as a pizza company, but as a technology company that happens to sell pizza. In 2015, under what they called Anywhere, Domino's launched ordering integrations across Twitter, smartwatches, Amazon Alexa, Samsung Smart TVs, and Ford's Sync platform. A customer could order a pizza by tweeting a pizza emoji at the official account. By 2017, 65% of Domino's US orders came through digital channels, a number that outpaced virtually every competitor in the restaurant industry. Doyle believed, and said publicly, that Domino's was one of the top 5 e-commerce platforms in the world by transaction count, behind Amazon and Apple, but potentially ahead of everyone else. The technology investment wasn't separate from the transparency campaign. It was the same logic applied to a different problem. The confession had proven that making things easier and clearer for customers, even when that means admitting something uncomfortable, builds more loyalty than protecting the brand's image. The ordering technology was a version of the same bet. Don't make customers adapt to your system. Build a system that works the way customers already live. Domino's also invented what they called fortressing, opening more stores in dense geographic areas to reduce delivery radiuses and cut delivery times. More stores meant slower delivery distances, meant fresher product, meant fewer complaints. The strategy that had built the brand on speed now rebuilt it on reliability. By the time Doyle left, Domino's was closing in on 15,000 locations worldwide. When he arrived, there were around 9,000. Domino's in 2024 is a categorically different company than Domino's in 2008. The stock has traded near all-time highs. The brand has over 19,000 locations in more than 90 countries, and it's done something almost no fast food brand manages. It's held on to a premium perception despite being a delivery pizza company that competes partly on price. It's not a perfect story. The company has faced ongoing criticism over franchise economics. The structure that made the Wall Street numbers look extraordinary put real pressure on individual store operators during periods of inflation and staffing difficulty. That tension hasn't been fully resolved. But the central fact is this: Domino's entered the 2000s and 10s as a brand that consumers actively disliked, and exited the decade as one of the strongest performing stocks of its era. That turnaround began not with a new product or a new CEO or a new logo. It began with a decision to stop pretending the problem wasn't real. The pizza turnaround campaign worked because it was brutally specific. It didn't say, "We know we have some room to improve." It played actual focus group footage where a woman said the crust tasted like cardboard. Specific criticism can be addressed. Specific criticism, when addressed, is verifiable. Vague self-awareness buys goodwill. Specific self-awareness buys trust. Domino's didn't run the confession ad and then ship the same pizza. They rebuilt the recipe first, ran the ad campaign second, and launched simultaneously. The confession without the product would have been a PR stunt. The product without the confession would have been invisible. Both had to be real, and both had to happen together. What Doyle understood was that Domino's shame about its product was a structural asset, not just a liability. Most companies with a quality problem try to bury it and quietly fix it. But if you can make the admission loud enough, you get to draw a visible line. Everything before this moment was the old Domino's. Everything after is new. Customers who hated the old product were given explicit permission and explicit reason to reconsider. The shame became the marketing. Here's what we know about Domino's in 2008. The stock was near an all-time low. Focus groups said the crust tasted like cardboard. The brand had a quality problem it had never publicly acknowledged, and no competitive answer to the brand's eating its market share. By 2018, the stock had risen more than 2,200%. The company was the largest pizza brand in the world, and it had gotten there by doing the thing that every PR handbook says you should never do: airing your own worst reviews on national television. The question every brand sitting on a product problem has to answer is this: do you believe your customers would reward you for telling the truth? Most companies say no. They protect the image. They manage the narrative. They assume that the moment consumers see behind the curtain, trust collapses. Domino's ran the opposite experiment, and what they found was that consumers don't actually expect perfection. They expect honesty. The gap between brand promise and reality is something everyone already senses. What no one expects, and what almost no company ever delivers, is a brand that closes that gap by admitting it's there. Patrick Doyle walked into a camera in 2010 holding a destroyed pizza and made a promise to a customer in Minnesota he'd never met. Most executives would have sent a coupon. Domino's bet its future on the idea that the promise itself, made publicly and kept visibly, was worth more than any amount of spin. The stock chart says they were right. The lesson isn't that you should admit failure. The lesson is that admitting failure is only the beginning, and the brands that treat it as an ending stop there, while the brands that treat it as an opening do something with it. Domino's did something with it.